Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Delighted to welcome here amongst us today the Foreign Minister of Egypt, Ambassador Nabil Fahmy, who was a career Foreign Service officer, served in various posts for over a period of about 36 years, including two particularly important ambassadorships. He was, for a couple of years, the ambassador of his country to Japan, and then he was 9 years ambassador to the United States, which is, of course, a great indication of the confidence with which he was held in Cairo. He left the Foreign Service, was the dean of School of Public Service at the American University in Cairo, and then with the recent developments was called back to be the foreign minister of his country. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
So perhaps we could I don't think you could be here at a more interesting time for the participants in this country, in this conference, and I think we'd be very interested in hearing your views on what's happening in Egypt at the moment. The focus of this conference has been youth empowerment, and since I think the issue of youth empowerment may have had something to do with the political turbulence in Egypt, perhaps you could begin by talking to us a little bit about the challenges and opportunities that confront Egyptian youth and how you see the prospects going forward.
Sure. I mean, when I was in Washington, John was my boss in many different capacities. So I was always flattered when he would take my phone calls or be available for breakfast or lunch. But to be fair to him, in spite of his high offices, he was accessible to diplomats like myself, so I just wanted to thank him publicly for that, because it's always useful when you can get to important people. Since I'm used to answering his questions, I actually will try to answer the question he put to us, to me. You know, I have to start by saying I am extremely proud of our youth. We didn't empower them, so they empowered themselves. That's exactly what happened. We didn't give them a role in the policy debate as young people, and definitely not in the political debate. And between our problems of governance, I mean our governance deficiencies, the youth bulge, 56% of Egypt, of our population, is younger than 25 years old. If you go take it to 35, it's 65%. So more than half of our people are youth in one form or the other, one age group or the other, and definitely in comparison to me. Mm-hmm. So you can't ignore half of your people. Since we didn't respond to them, and I accept criticism on that, since we didn't respond to them early enough, they decided January 25th, 2011, we'll do it ourselves. And they literally went out on the street, they did not want to overthrow the president. They just wanted to ensure themselves a role in defining the future, specifically in changing the Constitution and ensuring that the process thereafter would be a democratic electoral one. There was so much support from the old guys like me to the youth that they shifted their demands from change the Constitution to change the whole government and then change the president and so on and so forth. That was 2 years ago. Let me also say that they did this having announced beforehand, 2 or 3 months beforehand, that they would do this on this specific date in this specific venue. So it's a really, really strange way to overthrow a government, that you actually tell it, I'm going to do it on that date and on that venue. And again, to be very candid with all of you, we started the process of rebuilding Egypt, establishing a different political system, and we messed it up again. Rather than putting together a constitution first, and then going into an electoral process. We jumped into the electoral process immediately, which divides you by definition. You're competing with each other. And we did that before we put together the Constitution. So we ended up electing a parliament and a president with no rules of the game, without defining who we were politically. What's happening in Egypt today is all about trying to define our political image in the 21st century. So anyway, a year and a half after the first revolution, we had elected a new president 3 months before he had finished his first term. The youth woke up again, and they said, 1 year in office, we will hold you accountable. We will have millions of signatures. You have failed because you're pursuing policies that are exclusive. And therefore, either you call for new elections or we will demonstrate. On June 30th, exactly on that date, they started to demonstrate, and they had over 20 million signatures. Ooh. And again, the rest of the community went out to support the youth. I make this point not to take sides between the Islamists and the secularists. My side is known, that's not the issue. But I make this point because this is not about changing government. It's about changing society. And the youth are coming in. My son and his peers, they're as Egyptian as I am, but they're different kinds of Egyptians. I mean, I have to tell you the story. I have a grandson who's 5. Last year he came out at our beach house in the morning at 6 or 7, whatever it was. He woke up, I was reading the paper, and he goes by and he says, "What are you doing?" "I'm reading the paper." He's a 5-year-old, old school. You know, I'm a Middle Eastern. I'm not used to being told old school by my grandson. But I was surprised. I laughed, of course, and he ignored me and went to play with my dog. When his mother woke up, I said, "Your son just called me old school." And she said, what was he doing? "What were you doing?" "I was reading the paper." "We don't buy the paper. We read the paper on the internet. At night and in the morning, every hour. It's a different world for these kids. Half of our people are of a different world. This is all about them. We have to empower them now because they have empowered themselves politically. I need to give them the space for that political empowerment, and we will. But equally so, I need to give them the economic empowerment. And it is very difficult in Egypt to get a bank loan for a young entrepreneur who has nothing to mortgage. If you can mortgage something, fine. But you want to go up there and mortgage an idea. It's not yet in our culture. And these kids have a lot of good ideas, frankly. They're well educated, whether they are educated domestically or internationally. And I say this because where we don't do a good job in education, they pick it up in the internet. I'm talking about the smart kids. We have to do a better job in education for the average Egyptian. That definitely has to be done, particularly in the public schools. There is a problem there because the numbers vis-a-vis the capacities available and the assets and all that. But that's one thing. Frankly, to allow the youth to be able to translate their dreams into reality, we need to provide economic assets accessible to them, and we don't have that system. What we've been able to do is create what we call a social fund. Provides micro and small, medium-sized loans, but it's, again, not a market-oriented project. The second thing, which I mentioned first, is Egyptians want to determine who they are, so you need to give them political space. We're doing that. We have a huge number of parties, but in all honesty, we need for this to be done in a civilized fashion that is incrementally productive. We need to implement what we're calling the democratic roadmap, which is a 9-month roadmap started in July until next spring, when we finish the new constitution, have a referendum on that, have a public debate on the new constitution, and then hold elections for parliament and for president.
So if I could just interject on that point, on the political part, and then maybe we can go on to the economic prospects. Do you have a reasonably high level of confidence that this roadmap might work out better than the first one, where you said there was a false start? I take it, I'm sort of taking as implied in some of your comments, that you think it's going to work out better politically this time and move more on a path towards stability. How confident are you of that?
I'm sort of a strange mix myself, in that as a bureaucrat and academic, and then now I'm in politics. I honestly believe we have the order right. Mm-hmm. We had to do the Constitution first and then the election. So in that respect, it's right. And therefore, I'm much more optimistic now than before.
Good.
What concerns me is security. It also has to be inclusive. To be inclusive, it means bringing in people that you don't agree with. And if there's violence, you polarize the community. So are we on the right track? Yes. Will it be challenging? Yes. It still will be.
So let's assume for a moment that it does stay on track. We know that tourism has fallen off, that foreign investment presumably has been discouraged. Do you also see a kind of a pathway towards restoring those kinds of activities so that both your business community and the international business community can help contribute to the revival of the Egyptian economy? I
see a pathway, I see a program, and I see a tremendous interest internationally. I mean, given this job in particular, I meet a lot of foreigners, and they're all asking me when they can come in and invest, and they ask about specific details. In other words, there's an interest, and they just want to make sure that what concerns them, whether it's security or investment or arbitration, is there. So there is the international interest because the market's so large. You know, a quarter of the Middle East lives in Egypt, and it's an 85 million, and I'm counting bureaucratically, so it's obviously more than that. The market is there. We have a very strong tourist sector, infrastructure-wise. It's not being utilized because of the last couple of months, but it's there. We have tremendous consumer potential, energy potential, infrastructure potential. So the market's there. I would add to that the government, the present government, ironically, even though we've had 2 revolutions, is being characterized as the most liberal government in Egypt's history. Not because I'm there, but because most of the economists are market-oriented economists who have studied in the West. And I can tell you from my own experience, I lean towards help the people part of the debate. They are considerate of that, but they lean towards sustained, correct economic policy side of the debate. And we have therefore put forward an economic program which aims to spend £22 billion, very large percentage of which is on infrastructure. If you want, employment-intensive projects. We've also provided liquidity so that the government can pay back its arrears to contractors, to oil companies. That puts money into the market. It also gives a strong message to investors that you're going to get your money, that the system is working. So I actually believe that any investor today sees everything he wants in Egypt available. The only concern they still may have is security going to be sustainable or not? And that's why, frankly, we're working on that element quite strongly. It is much, much better than it was a couple of months ago. It's secure in the overwhelming, all over Egypt. There are some minor areas where it's not secure, and those areas, frankly, are not investment targets anyway.
Have you gotten to the point that the government is proactively encouraging foreign investment or having road shows or anything like that, or is it too soon for that, in your opinion?
No, we actually started 2 days ago with, well, a week ago, I'm jet lagged, excuse me, with a conference in London, and then recently just in Terrytown, talking to not the business sector directly in Terrytown, but talking to people who are, if you want, advisors to the business sector, who would give political analysis to what's happening in the country. So the long answer to that is yes. And I think, and we also have significant interest with real cash dividends from the Gulf already. This will move very, very quickly, provided we have security.
So perhaps you're mentioning the Gulf provides a useful transition to the issue of Egypt's foreign policy. And I guess the two areas that I'd be interested in hearing about would be, first, the relationship with the United States. How do you see that at the moment, given the fact that it's been such an important bilateral relationship in past years? And I think we'd be interested in your evaluation of that. And then perhaps after that, maybe a discussion of the situation in the region and Egypt's approach to the rest of the Middle East.
Look, we see ourselves as a major regional power that has an internationalist bent to it. And we live on two seas, literally in two continents at the same time. Our four strategic interests are either completely or partially brought in from abroad. Water, energy, food, and defense equipment. So if those are your four significant interests, and there's a strong foreign component, you have to have relations with the world. You can't live in isolation. If you're going to have relations with the world, you can't ignore America. I say this not to give the impression that we do this grudgingly. No, I say this to make the point very clear. We do this, it serves our national interest to do it. And because it does, this relationship will be sustainable. And it will continue. There will be good times and bad times. But neither Egypt nor America has the luxury of saying, I've had enough of this. Because if you have interest in the Middle East, you can't ignore a quarter of the Middle East. A quarter of the Middle East with the longest history in the Middle East and the widest cultural network in the Middle East. And what I mean by this is, look, almost all of the new political, economic, and social trends in the Middle East over the years have come out of Egypt. Not only the good ones, also the bad ones. So if you really want to know what's going to happen in the future, you really better understand what's happening in Egypt. And you need to find a way to have this relationship. But let me address the challenges, because I think that's an important point. The main challenge we're facing now is America doesn't know how to deal with the Arab people. You've never had to do that. You always dealt with the Arab governments. And since the Arab governments, I mean, you would argue, well, that's normal. It is. But if we were all Democrats, then dealing with the governments means you're dealing with the people. Frankly, we had a governance deficiency or a governance deficit. Therefore, dealing only with the governments doesn't mean you're relating to the people. It's different now. You're going to have to deal with the people, which means short-term as well as long-term policies. You can't ignore the fact that what you do now affects public opinion, because that public opinion will affect our policies. While in the past, frankly, even myself, I could ignore it. When I was a professional diplomat, the time span between how quickly and when the public is angry or happy and how it affects the change in policy was quite long. now, frankly, I'll share with you another quick story, but then move on. I had a meeting with Secretary Kerry on Sunday. You walk into these meetings, the first thing you do is take a picture. And by the time you got the press in and out, one of my colleagues gave me his phone, and it had the picture of Secretary Kerry and myself. We hadn't even sat down yet. And the comment was, have a good meeting, but don't compromise. So I didn't know who this was. This was simply a tweet. Mm-hmm. People were following in real time, split second. And it came back to me even before I sat down. So, yes, I will be governed more and more by my domestic politics, as you are in America. We need each other. We're going to have to manage. I mean, you know, I spent a lot of my time in Congress, and I gave hundreds of speeches when I was here because that's how America works. Mm-hmm. It's going to be that way, maybe to a different degree, but it can be that way also in our part of the world. It's going to be more complicated. But do we need you? Definitely. Will we need you? Yes. Will we have a engaged relationship? Yes. And vice versa. But we both have work to do. Mm-hmm. There's much more anti-Americanism in the Middle East than there was to be in the past. Again, because the public is emotional. In the past, even when Americans complained to me, the public was not emotional. They weren't engaged in this. Now they are. And there's also concern, and I speak as the Egyptian foreign minister, because of our events over the last 2.5 years, a lot of which I'm very proud of, by the way. People here are wondering, what are we doing, where are we going? And I have spent half of this week explaining it.
So the rest of the region, perhaps we could get a little bit of your take, I suppose, most importantly, on how you see the situation, first of all, in the Arab-Israeli question and Secretary Kerry's efforts towards brokering some kind of peace there. And then secondly, the situation in Syria. I suppose that would be the two first things we'd want to hear about.
Let me address those very quickly. And I think on both counts, there's something different from when I was doing this as a diplomat. We support Secretary Kerry's efforts to get the Israelis and Palestinians to negotiate and reach a deal over the next 9 months. And we will continue to support that. Everybody I know thinks the Americans are serious. Not only the Secretary, but also the President. And that's a big asset. When people think you're serious, they know you can provide tremendous support, and they also know that there can be a lot of pain there if you don't respond seriously. So it leads to serious negotiation. It doesn't necessarily mean we're going to succeed, but these negotiations are serious. And they're serious because of, and I'm going to be very candid with you, because of the approach that the Secretary has taken. He's determined, seriously determined, and he keeps after this repeatedly. So I'm impressed, frankly. I'm not yet ready to be euphoric and we have a deal. We're far from that. But yes, there's a new tone and new temperament in this process.
Extraordinary, if I may say, just as a practical matter, an extraordinary travel schedule. He seems to show up everywhere all the time.
Exactly. And not only that, I can tell you, he's on the phone continuously. Mm-hmm. So there's something happening here. We will see whether it's going to be a major disappointment or not, or a major success, but it's serious. But the problems are difficult, so let's not become too optimistic too quickly. The other side of it, Syria, and all the way down to the Gulf. Syria is a geopolitical battle. There are more people fighting in Syria that are not Syrian, fighting around the Syrian issue, that are not Syrian than there are Syrians. A lot of different parties. If you look, we had a meeting of the Friends of Syria group yesterday. All of the Gulf was there. Turkey was there. All of the West was there. We were there. They didn't invite the Iranians, but they're part of the debate on Syria. So there is this geopolitical competition on Syria. Then you have the sectarian issues that relate to the Syrian problem. Then you add to that the issue of a governance deficit and the desire of the Syrian reformers to have a more democratic system. Then you add to that international terrorism. It's a mess, to say the least. It's going to be a tremendous challenge. And its implications will have ramifications down to the Gulf, into Lebanon, possibly in Jordan. So this is a regional challenge, really. What we do in Egypt will affect both of those issues, the peace process and the Syrian dimension. In all honesty, the Palestinians and the Israelis will face very serious questions about Jerusalem, territory, security, refugees. They're going to be very difficult for both of them to answer. Traditionally, the idea is the U.S. brings in Israel, and the Arabs, especially the Egyptians, bring in the Palestinians. When the going gets tough, the Palestinians will need us. And if we therefore settle and regain our role, that will help the peace process tremendously. Same applies in Syria. We have a less traditional role there, but as we settle and once again become the kernel, the beacon of the Arab world, you bring up again the nationalistic trend versus the sectarian trend. And if we can get back to we are nation states rather than Muslims, Christians, Shiite, Sunnis, and so on, then you move the debate back into traditional state-to-state politics. And I think that will help push back the sectarian divide a little bit. Without it, if we end up dividing Syria on a sectarian basis, that's a recipe for destroying the whole region.
Right. I think you make a convincing case that restoring Egypt to a level of political and economic normalcy can have beneficial side effects in the region.
I believe so.
As a whole. What about Europe in all of this? I mean, they often talk about how they're the second or the equal to the largest economic bloc in the world. They're staring at North Africa geographically just across the sea. What reactions and what assistance and what relationships have you had with them since you assumed your office?
Well, first of all, they are, as you said, right across the sea. So logically speaking, they should have a tremendous interest, as we do, in what's happening in Europe. Historically, they haven't played a strong political role, but have played a stronger economic role. I would love to see Europe much more aggressive in capacity building in North Africa and the Middle East. I don't want the world to make us more Italian or more French or more Dutch. I want them to help us become better Egyptians. And that's all about education, about capacity building, about training, about youth. If they do that, they will have very stable neighbors. And if they don't, then you're going to have an economic platform that is very volatile with ramifications on the northern Mediterranean, if not the eastern Mediterranean. I can't imagine that Europe will suddenly become a political superpower just because it's so complicated to manage that. But they've played, for lack of a better, well, they've played they've had interesting changes. Let me just give you two examples. On the issue of Israeli settlements in the West Bank and Gaza, mostly in the West Bank, they took a position that we support the negotiations, but if products are produced in the settlements in the West Bank, we won't buy them. Or there's an additional tax to them. There's some restriction in terms of if it's inside Israel, it's fine. But if it's in occupied territories, then it needs more scrutiny. It's an interesting political step. It's very smart, and I think it's a very useful political tool. It's not, we're going to force the solution on you, but there's a consequence to the actions. And they attempted, with the Americans, they attempted to help get us to solve our problems about a month and a half ago. That didn't work. Not because they had the wrong idea, but basically because the Egyptian parties weren't ready yet. And I don't think the European parties completely understood the chemistry that existed between the Egyptian parties. So they seem to be moving more and more into a political role, but it's not going to anywhere in the near future be the exclusive or the decisive role.
So we're coming towards a close here and we're running out of time. Perhaps I can go back to the opening of our discussion where I talked about the theme of this conference being youth empowerment. One of the related themes has been the issue of fostering public-private partnerships. Could you tell us a little bit about how much credence or how much currency the idea of public-private partnerships has in Egypt, and whether you see any opportunity for perhaps some public-private partnerships from abroad playing some kind of a role in your country?
I don't think we can develop to our full potential without public-private partnerships. We need to grow at least 8 to 10% a year for at least the next 8-9 years, and have the distribution of that dividend much more efficient than was in the past. And we can't simply reach those figures unless we have both the private sector and the public sector working together. And it will be generated most of all by the private sector, with the public sector, quote unquote, the government, helping with the infrastructure. So it's imperative for our future that we do that. 3 years ago, we were really embarking on an aggressive public-private partnership program. With the two revolutions, people have been quite hesitant about selling off assets or getting into significant partnerships. But I see this as the future as well. I mean, once we get this process settled, and this 9-month program is already 2.5 months over. So within the next 6 months, this program will, the time frame will have been over. Even though a significant part of it is domestic public-private partnership, but the same thing applies to foreign partnership. We started out in the past in the energy sector, oil refineries, petrochemical projects, electricity at a certain point in time. So the possibility is there to do this. And it's not the possibility, it is imperative if we're going to move forward. Our economy is not large enough to depend only on the public sector. And the public sector is too large for it not to be part of the growth of the economy. Mm-hmm. So, do you have any parting comments that you'd like to make before we wind up the conversation? Well, yeah, of course I do.
Well, I just want to be sure there was nothing
sure.
you had failed to say
I mean,
that you wanted to say.
I'm honestly very proud to be an Egyptian. It's been a volatile 2.5 years, but I'm very proud to see Egyptians waking up and engaging in public politics, in the public domain. I'm very proud of the youth. They're the ones who did this. They're the future. I will not underestimate the challenges. because we need to provide them the space, the assets, the stability. But this is a country it's waking up. There will be tremendous potential there, and I encourage you not only to visit, but to invest there.
Well, Nabil Fahmy, Foreign Minister of Egypt, I think I speak for everybody in this room when I say we wish you the very best in your future endeavors, and thanks for joining us this afternoon.
Thank you, John.